Welcome to um, my introduction to our first movie, which is 8 Billion Angels. The film was released in 2021, and the United Nations announced that the human population reached 8 billion people on Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. A while earlier, I bought this sticker in the middle of this slide in 2006, and as you see, copyright is 2002. And at the 6 million mark was actually reached, 6 billion people, according to the UN, on October 12th, 1999. So if we connect that with what we learned from the first slide with the film title, there was an increase of 2 billion people within these 22 years. Or if you are more rough, rule of the thumb, human population is currently adding 1 billion people per decade. Question is, were we always that many? Let me play this interesting animation to make clear how that development in the human population numbers came upon.
We'll show population growth from the year 1 CE to the present and project our growth into the year 2050. Population concentrations will be indicated by dots, each of which will represent 1 million people. In areas where people are spread out and don't live in concentrations of 1 million, dots are placed in the middle of their approximate range. Historical references will be provided by images and text at the bottom of the screen.
As you see, for the majority of the film, there was not much going on, and then in the last minute, we had almost an explosion of people being added to the human population.
We'll show
Here we see this actually pretty much the same period from about 1000 uh, current epoch to 2021. Can you pinpoint two periods where this growth changed substantially? And any ideas about why that happened at that time. We can discuss that later in class, what you come up with. So why does this matter? Why is it something we should care about, that we are so many? It's basically two things. More people are using more resources, right? So we have increased consumption. We see that, for example, here with our catches of marine fish. We can also see that, actually not in these, but I will show a second slide where you see way more of those. And then also a story of declining resources, of less and less essential, or more or less essential resources on the planet. So here we see some related, some declines of the increase in people, which we see here, and the associated increase in livestock. Of course, climate change driven by increase in temperature, carbon dioxide emissions, one of the major factors for that, and decline of resources, or decline of other things on the planet, biodiversity, fellow citizen of planet Earth. Here are vertebrate species. Here is decline of forest. Here is an increase of dead zones, which are zones of limited or no oxygen in the oceans or lakes. Here is actually a more varied situation with ozone depletion. As you might know, there was a treaty that reduced the prevalent killers of the ozone layer, the CFCs, from refrigerants and sprays, right? So that was banned, and so that's why this goes back down. Freshwater resources per head of per human person decline very steeply. Here is a overwhelming picture with many more factors, but you see the same situation. Here is the human population increase. In the same way, more and more rivers were dammed, more and more water was used, more and more fertilizer is consumed, with the effects of excess fertilizer driving those dead zones in the oceans and lakes. Urban population, subset of total population, paper consumption, motor vehicles, cell phones, tourism, which is a good thing, but of course so many people have to be moved back and forth. That is a problem. CO2, nitric oxide, methane, ozone depletion. This does not show that decline that we have after the treaty, because it's a bigger time scale, and so on. You can look at the slides in more on your own pace to see all the factors here. So what actually happens also is that we use more and more resources. Every one of us gets less of that, but totally we are using too much. So here is that interesting statistics of how much different countries are overshooting over what the Earth can provide. So the average American we have actually, we would need 5 worlds if every person on the planet would live like an average US citizen. You see, Germany is a little bit better here, my home country, with 3 Earths, but way too much too. And the often blamed big polluters here, China and India, are actually doing better than the industrialized Western countries. India specifically, still very low developed, a lot of people in poverty, no electricity, and so on, with less than one planet. What else happens is, of course, that our growth goes on the expense of other species, right? The diversity of life on the planet is diminishing, and by that the services these other organisms involuntary do for us are getting diminished, which causes a lot of problems. And there's of course the question of fairness. What is our share of the planet versus everything else, every other being besides humans? So here you see about 10,000 years ago, 99% of the biomass was from wild animals, of the animal biomass, I should say, and only 1% by humans. Today, the relation is very different. 32% of the total biomass of animals is from us, humans. 67%, even double, more than double than that, is our livestock. And we leave for the wild animals just 1%. The pace of that decline in biodiversity and populations of animals is speeding up, as we have seen in that video before. In the last 46 years, so roughly 50 years, right? Humanity doubled, more than doubled, and in that short time, about 2/3 of vertebrates, wild vertebrates, disappeared. Of course, climate change. This is a pretty recent map, right, of the measurements of carbon dioxide concentrations on Hawaii, on Mauna Kea, and you see the ups and downs. That's the winter in the northern hemisphere, when there's less leaves, less photosynthesis, is when the carbon dioxide rises. Then in the summer, the growing season, it has a minimum, but you see you can easily put a straight line through this. And we are currently at about 420 parts per million. And that is, if you look in old textbooks, about half as much more carbon dioxide than they say is in the atmosphere. So that is also a recent change. So what can you do? This is related, of course. We're looking at what can you do for the climate, but related to population. You see the biggest impact you can have by having 2 children less than you might desire. And the second biggest would be having 1 fewer child than what you desire. You see very much less impact is whether you are car free, whether you are not flying, avoid one round trip transatlantic flight per year, whether you are going green with your energy usage, which you can do without having solar panels. You can just buy renewable electricity only, right? You can also, let me see, what is this? This has disappeared here. Let me get this off. Plant-based diet, right? So if you are not entirely, I think, here in this case, but mainly are meatless. And then we have other things that are really making not much difference. Wash your clothes in cold water, recycle, has a little impact on climate change, of course a big one on plastic pollution and other things. Dry your clothes instead of using a dryer, or upgrade your light bulb. So you see no comparison to what diminishing this population problem is compared to that. Here's another statistics which shows you per equivalent of carbon dioxide, the same thing basically. So that's something every one of us can do, but we are social animals. A lot of things are decided in communities and policies. So what can be done worldwide in this case? And it is really like this picture: give more power to women, empower women. That is changing a lot of things that you might not have thought in the beginning. And there are initiatives where education that focus on the education of women here in Africa or other third world countries, but it is the same principle actually also around here in rural America. And what does that do if you educate young women? You see, statistically, educated women are reinvesting the vast majority of their earnings back into their family than spending it on other things, 90%, right? Then the income is higher, of course, for educated women versus not, about twice statistically. And educated girls are 3 times less prone to HIV, AIDS, and also to malaria, although that's not quantified here. And educated girls are five times less likely to marry early in life as children, and or have children very early in their life, in situations where they don't have much choice on that, and then often have multiple pregnancies soon after, which of course on a global scale then translates into population increase.